Good afternoon and welcome to Gulfstream Park on Florida Derby Day. I'm Gabby Gaudette, joined by Andy Serling, back in town for the day, and you've been missed here in South Florida.
Well, that's very nice. I've missed being down here. I've missed you. I've missed everybody around here. It's such a great team here at Gulfstream Park, and it's great to be back, and it's certainly great to be back in what promises to be a thrilling day of racing.
It's a thrilling day. We've got a lot of ground to cover, though, so we're going to try to breeze on through this as we but before we get to the card, though, what an amazing event that this is going to be once we finally get to the Grade 1 Florida Derby. This is an unprecedented event. Two undefeated 3-year-olds batting it out before they actually even get to Kentucky. It's going to be an amazing day.
No, it really is an East Coast, West Coast battle. It's really got everything you could want. Obviously, the two seem to tower over the field on paper, but it is quite a matchup.
It definitely is. We'll take a look now at our featured wagers and our guarantees. And we started all off in today's first race with that rolling super high 5 for $1. We also kick off the 50-cent early pick 5 in race 1. And on this 14 race program, the Rainbow 6 doesn't start until race 9. So do take note of that. And we do have a $200,000 jackpot guarantee in the Rainbow 6. Again, in race 9. In the late pick 5, we have a $250,000 guarantee that takes place in race 10, and in race 11 a $350,000 guarantee for that late pick 4. So you can't ask for any more action than that.
No, there's great stuff. I mean, there's so many races that are interesting on this card, and we could probably spend 2 hours and 40 minutes on it, but we've got about 40 minutes to cover it, and we'll start out by talking about my my pick 5 play in the first race today. Try to get through this pick 5. I was hoping to leave town with a winning pick 5 on my last day here, but apparently you're going to make me do something today. I'm going to use team colors along with Valid, and I considered singling Valid and using others in legs, but I thought I'd give us a shot if we get there with a horse who has a chance to upset the favorite, who's certainly tough to beat. Using the 5, 7, 11 here, 3 by 3 by 3 by 2 by 2. Talk about it later, talk about it here. Arapeka, the 11, has to be considered, Gabby, the horse to beat, whether you like this horse or not.
And yes, this horse is coming into this race with the back class. Obviously, he's Grade 1 placed, and he's has a back class. But now he's in for the $25,000 tag. You have to question kind of what direction this horse is obviously going in. And I think there's a little bit more upside to horses towards his inside. He's one you have to respect. I see you use him on the early pick 5. I thought he was kind of up against it there off of the layoff when Go Around went to the, remember there were a couple of scratches in there.
He ran fine in there.
He did.
Yeah, Go Around ran very well for Bill Mott. He could be a horse that could have a good year.
Exactly. So if you're trying to find some other options here, perhaps the 7 Don Camillo. This is a horse that I opted for Jimmy Jerkins, and I think there's going to be a little bit more pace in front of him today, and it could perhaps suit his running style. Last time out, he was a bit keen, a little bit headstrong too, and the pace kind of fell apart in front of him. I think it's a different dynamic today.
Yeah, I thought he actually moved into the teeth of the pace, and he's the one who sort of helped collapse that race as it was falling apart at the end. And I agree. I thought he's a horse that could take another step forward in here. Gold Shield is a horse I'm going to use, and believe it or not, even though Dream Supreme, the dam, was $1 million winner on the dirt and a dirt horse, she's been a good producer with turf horses with 2 winners out of 5 to try it, but 2 of the other horses were pretty effective on turf. And I know Shug's kind of giving up on Gold Shield, a horse they spent a lot of money for, but he has some good numbers going. That he's, unlike a lot of trainers, he has decent numbers going with non-maidens first time in the turf, so I'm going to use that one. But I think there's plenty of horses in here that have more than a puncher's chance.
And when's the luck going to run out on the 8 Indian Guide? He's been on an absolute rampage lately, both on the dirt and the turf. But I thought it was a credible performance last time out. And the reason why this horse finds so much success is his positional speed. He gets into a good position early. He's tactical, and I'll use him again. I don't know if he can win in this. It's a much, much tougher field than what he's ever faced. We'll move on to the second race, a maiden $50,000 event, a mile onto the turf course. And there are several horses in here that had some troubled trips.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the 8 horse has that win, but keep in mind the 7 and 8 are both moving up, and what power the 8 who has the win in the DQ and somewhat of a controversial DQ. This may be a much tougher field, and we're going to show a couple of replays, I think starting with the 1 Mav, who was the 10 horse in the race we're looking at. And I thought it was very interesting. You got 2 horses that both probably should have broken their maidens first time out, and for my money, you're going to see Mav is in a very good position with Paco Lopez and is going to get badly shuffled out of the running. And you sort of have a vision. It's hard when you watch it just the first time, Gabby, savvy. But keep in mind, this horse is about, what, about 3.5 lengths off of the leader here. And you're going to see that horse in red, the 2, starting to drop back. That horse is going to create separation and effectively take Mav out of the race.
And we can see him here just about now, kind of check up out of there. And you never really want to lose momentum, especially at a key point of the race. You see it's kind of a cavalry charge. Everybody else is making their move, whereas he unfortunately had to go backwards. But the interesting thing, since that key point of the race, was kind of from there to the stretch. This horse was never really, I thought, asked from then on.
Well, and he's also going to get into a troubled spot because he's not going all the way to the outside for whatever reason. So he's actually going to get himself sort of caught in a little bit behind horses. And I really think if you look at it, and he didn't have much trouble after that, but imagine if he didn't lose that position. As you say, it's such a key point. I think there's a very good chance he would have won. And now he draws an inside post from that outside post. And I also feel like he has more tactical speed than the other trip horse. And you and I reversed them. I feel it was splitting hairs for me.
It was splitting hairs. The 7, My Bucky's Boy, we'll take a look at that last replay too when he made his turf debut. And we'll start it off. He is the number 2 in this race, and you can see kind of on the back stretch. And he broke well. He kind of he
had a little trouble at the start. Actually, he was kind of hopped up and stayed back.
And he stays kind of towards the inside. He was reserved a little bit here on the back stretch. But I thought the main point of this race was kind of from here on to the finish line.
I agree with you. And you can see he's already been taken out of the picture. It's the same thing. It's amazing how similar in some ways these trips were, but this is the one of the 2. I was talking about the 10 last time, Mav. This is the one that really has trouble in the stretch because got shuffled back and sort of gets caught staying inside and never has a chance to get out during the run in the stretch.
And you want to kind of compare Mav and My Bucky's Boy, and as you said, Mav had experienced a little bit of early trouble, but here he was reserved. He had no room to run. Unfortunately, had to shift lugging in a little bit. So maybe that was his Achilles heels too. And are we going to see that kind of performance again? But he really had no room to run and no chance for Paco to ride him with any confidence during the stretch.
I agree. Both of these horses could easily have won their last races, and I think, like you do, that they're the 2 horses to beat, along with What Power. And Christophe Clemano has What Power. He's got some live group of entrants on today's card.
He really does. We'll move on to the 3rd race, restricted allowance optional claiming event, 6.5 furlongs there onto the main track. And I thought this was a kind of a tricky race because there are several horses coming out of similar races, several horses dropping. You land on the one, Rasta Rant, first off the claim, who I believe we have a statistic for the barn.
You know, I was grasping at straws because I felt like the only horses that I didn't want in here were the 4 and 7. And I honestly feel like I could play just about anybody else. And I thought it was interesting. Leo Gabriel's got a good numbers off the claim, and the only race he had this horse because he claimed it a few back. He actually got Rasta Rant to win, which is not an easy thing to do. And I was hoping maybe that magic would work again for him. But your horse, Wildcat Wish, Coal Miner, who ran well last time and probably lost to a better horse than he faces today. I think all of these horses have real chances.
It is really wide open. The thing about Rasta Rant, though, is he broke well last time out, and he kind of sucked out of there. And I like the fact that he draws the rail today because it could give him the ability to maybe sit closer, and I think that's kind of the tipping point for him. He needs to be about 3 lengths off the pace.
He doesn't want to get lost, or he'll never make up that ground.
No, he cannot get lost in the shuffle. But the 2, Wildcat Wish, I thought was coming out of some of the strongest races, especially go back to the 6.5 furlong try here at Gulfstream. I thought he moved a little bit too early when he was beaten by Lazarus Project. Homespun Hero looks like a horse that's kind of panned out lately, and I love the switch to Luis Saez.
It's a very good jockey change on that horse, and I didn't use him in my pick 5, and I kind of regretted it. And I think if I lose, he's a horse that that I'll be annoyed when he knocks me out of the pick 5.
Race 4, a nice maiden special weight on the turf at 1 mile and an 1/8, and we'll see this field. We have a handful of first-time starters, very well-bred first-time starters, and that kind of makes this race even more tricky.
It does. I mean, even the Mott horse, and I know he rarely wins, this comes from a super family, including Announce, who was a very good European. The dam herself was pretty good. Now, Mott's firsters usually need a race. You've got Chad with an almost $500,000 Galileo, and Sorsu could certainly win first time out, though in general, he has not won with his firsters in the turf, and it's not like that's changed since I left here. I focused on horses that have run. You put Chad's horse on top.
I love the breeding here. I love, and actually since you've left, we did see last weekend a really well-meant first-time starter for Chad win on the turf. And more so, I think his maiden special weight debuters here on the turf have been running well, whereas the maiden claimers have not been running very well. So this is, they're debuting this filly on the biggest day here in South Florida. She's very well bred. She's a half to magnificent song, grade 1 winner going long on the turf. The pedigree stands alone, and she looks like she's been working forwardly. But if I were playing the pick 5, you have no solid ground to stand on. So the 2, Bold Contender, perhaps is one of them. And we'll take a look at the most recent replay where this filly really ran a race.
No, she ran very, very well in here. The question is whether or not you think she can run as well in her second start. Because I mean, she's out in the middle of the racetrack. She's a legitimate 4+ wide, starting in the middle of the backstretch the entire turn. And this is not exactly a winning move. And I think the horse she loses to was a Cassie horse that actually was pretty good. It's mostly first-time stars in here. I thought this horse really ran very well and gamed the whole way. I have to use this horse. One of the reasons that I put her second to Main Asset was I thought that Main Asset was coming out of a much better race. That Conquest Dynasty race with Tap It Together, those are some very promising 3-year-old fillies. And Main Asset's also a horse that has some speed, and I feel like she could put herself a little bit more into the game. So I was hoping she'd be more forwardly placed. You don't seem to like her in this race.
She is coming out of a key race, and she very well could move forward off of it being fresh coming into this race and getting to a much firmer going. I preferred others in here, to be honest. I mean, I do respect her. I pick her 4th in here. But going back to Bold Contender, it looked like she was just going to circle the entire field. And I almost wonder if this is a type of filly that will actually prefer an inside post position, be covered up, and then just kind of pop out from there.
One would think that she would greatly benefit from that change. And even the 9 Charlotte Star you've in there, the dam, it's one where these dams, like Galileo's song, the dams have to Leck and 8 turf winners, and as well as the 9 horse Charlotte Star is a half of the St. Stephen and Shadow Sun River family. That's a very powerful turf family, and you can see they paid a lot for her. She has residual values of broodmare even if she can't really run.
And we'll move on to the 5th race, starting of our graded stakes action, the grade 3 skip away, 1 1/8 on the main track here. And Valid, boy, what a trip he had last time out in the Gulfstream Park Handicap.
Yeah, he was very unlucky. I mean, there were a lot of horses trained by Todd in that race, and one of them managed to get into his way. And I think you wanted to show the pan and head on of his last race.
And we'll cue that replay here right now. As we can see, Anchor Down, and Anchor Down was kind of erratic on the backstretch too. He was all over the place coming out of the gate. He was all over the place coming down the stretch. Valid just clips his heels. Oh, I can remember watching this live on the front side there, on the grandstand side, and just cringing. And I think that just speaks volumes of this horse's. He's so athletic.
He even got back on
to be able to regather himself and actually finish the race.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the everyone's getting out. I thought this was a lot of bad luck. I thought Valid was actually coming in a little bit as well. He's a terrific horse, and his other races make him the horse to beat. He's an hour and a half the horse to beat in this race. I put Team Color second. He did ride a rail that was actually okay. That was after the rail had been bad, and it got better that day. When Team Colors, there was also a wet track, but Team Colors has a good pedigree on the dirt. But in order for Valid to lose, he basically has to not show up.
Yes. And that is a question. You know, I was talking to Marcus Vitale on Tuesday in a quick interview there, and he did say, you know, after that race, it took him a few days. He kind of eased him back into his work pattern. He walked him for a few days, jogged him for a few days, and maybe he is a work or two short in the meantime. But he's so seasoned that I don't think that that's going to be a problem.
He's a real throwback, that horse. He just seems to have ran 12 times last year, and he hasn't missed a beat since he came back this year. He's just a wonderful horse.
What about Savoy Stomp, though? Now, this is kind of the tricky horse in here, in my opinion, because I did not like him last time out whatsoever.
Why would you?
And is this a horse that's finally starting to find himself? Is he a horse that's finally starting to prove that he is a two-turn horse?
Well, he ran a good race at Belmont, and he followed up with a couple of clunkers after that. I mean, I guess he's not impossible for Todd, but even his good race, I think his good race isn't good enough to beat Team Colors.
I agree. We'll move on to the 6th race here, a nice maiden special weight, 1 mile, and an 8th onto the turf course. And we do have a replay here, so we'll show it of the 9 Conquest Stormy. Last time out who did go against Abbott, who was third coming back out of that in the Cutler Bay.
You know, this is a situation with Conquest Stormy where I just thought the horse was a little bit unlucky in this race, and I thought ran very well. How good, though, is the race that Conquest Stormy is coming out of? That's the one thing that concerns me a little bit, because I thought she ran well, and she's stuck down the inside. You see her behind the horse in green, and doesn't really get that great a chance to get clear in the stretch until it's too late, and even then not clear.
And I also think you can see him visually. He's kind of got a long loping stride, and this horse is probably one that takes a couple of strides at the top of the stretch to really find his footing. So with that said, I love the fact that he gets out of distance, and I think that's going to make all the difference because of kind of how he runs. Was the trouble significant? I didn't think it was. Abbott, he kind of panned out in the Cutler Bay, but Sir Dudley Diggs, I agree with you. You have to question the strength of that last meet, especially.
He didn't run well in that opening race in the Rainbow Six last week, and he's just had his chances. Not impossible. The thing is, Berliner is coming out of a much, much better race.
Very tough.
I don't think it was any fault of Julian's. The horse just couldn't get himself to the outside. And yeah, he saved that ground at the end, but trying to make that big, long, sustained run right down the rail is not the easiest thing to do. And he did it behind some pretty promising horses like Inspector Lindley and the other horses in that race. I just think Berliner, who's run well in both his starts, might be too good for these.
Well, that's always what you want to see, is a horse kind of bobbing and weaving between horses, closing between the rail and other horses, so at least he showed a tendency to be very game. He was wide going in that first turn. He was floated about 5-6 wide, so that's something too. Now how is he going to, I don't worry about that outside post position. There's a lot going on in here.
Long run to the first turn.
Yeah, it's not and look at the 8, Silver Beach, a very well-bred horse by Tappet out of a multiple graded stakes winner mare.
Christophe is really emptying the barn on today's car. Well, don't forget, when he had the quarantine, he wasn't able to run for a while as well, and it's nice to see him in these horses, and he's got obviously some well-bred ones. Remember Mickey, I thought, ran sneaky okay last time, but Bolivar, who was on the pace that day, and that pace kind of collapsed at the end, I just thought overall that race might be weaker. I'm a Berliner fan, and I know he's over 2, but I think he's been more circumstantial, and he's going to be very tough to beat today.
He's coming out of the strongest races, in my opinion, as well. We'll move on to the Grade 2 Gulfstream Park Oaks, a mile and a 16th on the main track, and we will show the 2 replays here, and we'll start it off with Off the Tracks, when she came back under the handling of Roderick Rodriguez, and what a fantastic training job to get this filly ready off of the layoff from the Schuylerville, and she just looks like one that has a lot of talent.
She's clearly talented. I think the question, obviously, with the question isn't talent. We know she's a good horse. The question is, and I think of it because these are the big races for fillies, races like the Test, and I know they're in New York, but the Test and Prioris, is she a Test and Prioris horse, or is she a Kentucky Oaks, Mother Goose, Alabama type horse? I'm a little bit dubious that she wants to go long, and I feel like she's a horse, Gabby, you've got to have a strong opinion on. Either you just think she's better than these horses, or you think the distance is a problem. I think I found a stat for Todd Pletcher. I don't know if we use it. We did. Where a trainer switch and a graded stake on the dirt, his numbers aren't that good for what it's worth, and it's kind of rare for Todd, suggesting you won't expect to see some big move up going to Todd. And if we'll put that stat up, it's 2 for 12. The other thing is, while you've got Curlin as the sire, you've got a dam side that's really much more sprinting.
You do, and that's what you have to pay attention to in terms of pedigree. But a lot of the times when you look at these horses physically, when they sprint and then they stretch out to a route of ground, in my opinion, Andy, and looking at the Margate, she looks like she has more of a routing, cruising type of speed, more so than a sprint speed, and that's my opinion. And I think she should be able to handle the distance, at least from watching some of her replays. Maybe I'm wrong, but she's going to have that outside post. She has speed, and again, I think she has the kind of cruising speed that should go longer distances.
She's fast, and there's other speeds in here, but she's supposed to be the speed of the speeds. The question is, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to Gummo? Now, we'll look at Gummo's last race in the Alcibiades. It wasn't a very strong field. It was a sloppy sealed track at Keeneland, but I thought she was an impressive winner, and I know that Doug O'Neill had a plane bringing Nyquist here. I don't think he's bringing this filly here unless he thought she's ready to run. And she takes any step forward, you know she's handling the distance. I think she's going to be very tough. Doug O'Neill could have a huge day today.
He really could have a huge day. She obviously has proven at the distance, and this was a very strong race. And looking at her training in the morning, too, she's kind of a racy type of filly. She's been very keen. So, Andy, I wouldn't be surprised if she's actually pretty forwardly placed. And she's definitely not as fast as Off the Tracks, but I don't think she's going to be too far back.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I guess it depends depends how much speed we see and how fast they're going, if there's any separation. I'm going to take a shot with Go Maggie Go. We'll stick up a stat for trainer Dale Romans. For what it's worth, I thought this was interesting. Second-time starters that broke their maidens in their debut, stretching out. He's 4 for 8. These are horses that were paying over $9. 2 of them were stakes. 1 of them he won. I know, it was interesting. I thought that Louis Size had to sort of niggle on this horse to keep her in the game. If you watch that race, he was riding her a bit. And she still had a really nice run when she straightened out. I know the connections like the second-place finisher in there that did a lot of work. I was impressed by that, and I know she's coming back relatively soon, and you could argue she's being rushed a little bit in this spot. I'm going to take a shot with her that she's okay. You don't seem to be a big fan.
I'm not a big fan. I think there's other proven commodities, and also, I know it's kind of an oxymoronic statement that I say it about off the tracks, that I don't mind her stretching out to 2 turns just from that 6.5 for a long try. But I also like, at the same time, slow and steady progression of distances with these 3-year-old fillies. And that comes with the one Paola Queen. They brought her off the layoff. They sprinted her at 6 furlongs. They gave her another steady progression to 7/8, and now she stretches out to 2 turns. And I think sometimes with these 3-year-old fillies, it makes all the difference.
Sure, and she's certainly been improving. You look at her buyer figures. They're getting better with every start. She's not out of it. This is an interesting race.
It is. I love the Oaks today. We'll move on to the 8th, though, the Grade 3 Appleton. Another fantastic race. I think this is one of my favorite races on the card, going the mile on the turf. We'll start it off with Divisadero, and he was closing like an absolute freight train at the top of the stretch last out.
If he doesn't get badly compromised by the pace in this race, and he runs back to this race where he went a sub-22 final quarter, he's going to win. It's as simple as that. I guess his connections decided they wanted more time between races from whatever race he ran as his second start to run to that Churchill Downs turf race on Derby Day, the Turf Classic, because they could have run him in the Grade 1 mile race at Keeneland, but that's in a couple of weeks. He's the horse to beat in here. I've picked him second, but I have no illusions.
And wow, what a performance that was. And especially given the fact that Heart to Heart has gotten away with murder on the front end in his past couple of starts. Nobody has gone with that horse. He's gotten a loose lead on the front end and stolen races. And I thought, all considering, that was a very, very good seasonal debut. Now, we also have some other horses. The one All Included, I thought, was a very intriguing horse. Now cutting back to the mile, and the blinkers go on to really sharpen him up.
Yeah, what I've decided is I could use 3 in here, and I've sandwiched Divisadero between 2 horses that I think will be forwardly placed. I have to think Sky Captain, they'll look to use his speed that worked so well for him in the past, and with the blinkers on and Javier on the inside, All Included is going to be forwardly placed in here, and he doesn't really want a mile and 3/8. I think he's a dangerous, sneaky horse. The price will be fair on. I put him on top, but I tell you what, the 3 is over its head, but with his Exaltation isn't impossible, long on value, Force the Pass, we haven't even talked about, off the layoff. I think we've got some stats which are not great for Alan Goldberg, but he's clearly a talented horse that seemed to have gone a little wrong and wasn't getting out of the gate, but he's not impossible, and I even think the 8 Reporting Star is good enough to get a big piece of this.
Turf layoffs there, 17% and a negative ROI there, but I actually went up to Palmetto's on Monday, and I was speaking to the assistant, George Duarte, and they're expecting him to be forwardly placed because he's just been training differently in the morning too. It looks like in terms of training in the morning, he's shown a tendency to be faster, and sometimes that doesn't always transition. And the biggest question was the Belmont Derby a fluke, or was he tailing off? I think he's got a lot to prove today off the layoff.
His Belmont Derby was gigantic. If he can refine that form and build on today, he'll be a factor at Churchill, he'll be a factor in the Manhattan. He's a talented horse.
That's races 1 through 8. The Rainbow Six starts in today's 9th race. $200,000 jackpot guarantee. We'll get to it right after this commercial break. Welcome back to Gulfstream today. Big day today, the Grade 1 Florida Derby, as we will eventually see Mohaymen and Nyquist duke it out there in today's finale. But first, let's take a look at the Rainbow Six. We have a couple of guarantees today, including in the Rainbow Six a $200,000 jackpot guarantee. I did come up with a ticket, so we will cue that here now. And using 4 horses to start us off in this maiden special weight, and using 3 in race 10. My single does come in race 11 with Photo Call. I really do think that she's the mare to beat, and kind of keen around there using 3 horses in race 12 and 13, and using both Mohaymen and Nyquist in today's finale. $43.20. We'll get right to it. Race 9 does kick us off. Andy, how'd you see this race?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt. I'm not sure. Did we have a replay? Yeah, let's take a look at Dig Deep's last race. And Dig Deep has run extremely well in both his starts. He was bet off the board in his debut, and he lost to a Dale Romans horse, but he really delivered in a big way that day. He's run very well. He's sort of well posted on the outside. This has got the 2-turn experience. He's coming back to 1. I harbor no illusions that he's an hour the horse to beat, Gabby. And
I actually scratched into him. I was trying to take a stand against him with the 12 Cheyenne Bull, but he is out. Dig Deep really dug deep last time out, and Mahesto was sitting on go that race. I had a couple of reservations with him stretching out to 2 turns immediately off of that 6 furlong race, but now cutting back to 1 turn, he's going to be sitting on go. I like him. And there's some other horses in here that I think are intriguing. The 5 Tail of Mist I didn't see, but you like.
Yeah, I like Tail of Mist quite a bit. I don't know if he's good enough to beat the favorite. The problem with Tarpey's Zapper, who you have second, is I'm not betting this horse coming back 6 days after that debut performance. Though he ran fine in there. And Sea Wizard's obviously a horse that has some talent, a horse who lost to Destin in his debut. Tail of Mist ran that very good race, or solid race, I should say, when 3rd behind. I think he's a half to tonalist, this horse. When 3rd behind Shaggoff, when that one made his debut. He didn't run well in a subsequent Gulfstream race, but last time out, he was on the dead rail, and he was right down the dead rail every bit of that race. And he still ran a figure of 65. He ran a good time for him figure that puts him contentious here. And if you believe it was the dead rail, like I do, that caused him problems, he's a lot better than that looks. I don't know if he can beat the favorite, but I'm going to take my chances against everybody else.
The weird horse is Conviction, because they obviously, he's a very well-bred horse by Tappet out of Carson City, Pretty City. And it looks like they've kind of gone back to the drawing board, made a lot of adjustments. This horse was heavily bet, but really disappointing in debut.
He was awful.
He was awful. He really didn't run any lick that day. Now they put the blinkers on. I've seen him paddock school for the past 2 days, and he just looks like a horse. He's a Tappet. He misbehaves in the afternoon, and if he can overcome his mind and take a step forward, I think we're going to see something new, but he really does have to maybe move forward in terms of his behavior.
But you have to use him defensively. He took too much money in his debut for Todd to just completely dismiss him after 2 bad performances. He's all yours.
Yes, I agree with you. We'll go on to the 10th race, Sir Shackleton. This does kick off our late pick 5, and we do have that $250,000 guarantee in the late pick 5, and you came up with a ticket.
I do have a ticket in this race. I saw that you and I disagreed. Well, I think one thing we're probably agreement is that this is not an easy race. I'm going to use the 3 Grand Shores I know you're a big fan of. I'm leaving Defer Heaven out. If this $6,000 claimer wins this stake race at 7 furlongs, I'm going to lose, and I'm fully where I might. I like the 9, Just Call Kenny. I went 3 by 2, by 3, by 3, by 2. I agree with you, though. I thought about singling Photo Call and using other horses. I like Just Call Kenny in here as far as my bet. I'm going to just bet on Just Call Kenny to win this race and keep it simple after my pick 5. Just Call Kenny's a horse in his last race that made a big middle move into a very fast-paced race that fell apart. I thought he ran better than it looks on paper, and he's quietly an improved horse. I even thought his 3rd finish behind us, a knockout, where he was also attacking the pace, was a solid effort, and I'm going to hope he's a horse ready to take a step forward and get a good trip. This is a tough race.
I have my reservations about that particular race, though, because it's a knockout. I know he ran huge, but this is a horse that was going into there with recency. We had half the field who we hadn't seen in months. It's a knockout, one of them. El Nawi, another one. Even General A-Rod was one of them. Several of those horses in that small field were coming off layoffs, and I thought that moved him up because of that.
Except you could argue that it's a knockout. It was ready to run his best race of his life coming off the layoff, and it was a race that collapsed, and Just Call Kenny was the one attacking the pace. That would be the counter to that. Though, listen, I'm not in love with this horse. I just think he's going to be an overlay. I think he's better than his odds are going to be.
We have have two George Navarro horses, the one brothers of the time. I thought you see Gelfenstein Farm, the owners or the co-owners of XY Jet, ran a huge race in Dubai. Amicio Jaramillo stays on this horse versus Defer Heaven, and I'm thinking I actually moved Defer Heaven up a bit on my ticket because of the scratch of Anchor Down. He's going to be alone on the lead.
He is going to be alone. Well, WV Jet Setter could have something to do with that with Javier. I have to think he's going to go. I'm taking an anti-Defer Heaven position in here, and it may be one to my detriment.
I'm going to stick with Grand Shores one last time.
You love him.
I do. And
I thought of you as soon as I saw him in here.
He puts in strong races against far tougher horses. You look at horses like Tommy Macho versus Defer Heaven, and I just think he has the back class in here, and he fits the flow of the race if the number 7 goes with the 5.
You don't like Just Call Kenny, but Grand Shores with a much easier trip finished a quarter of a length in front of him in the Fred Hooper.
This game is all about opinions, Andy.
whether we can defend them or not.
Exactly. Race 11, the Grade 3 Orchid, a mile and 3/8 there on the turf course, and we'll start off with a replay of Photo Call, going back to the Rodeo Drive, actually back at Santa Anita.
Got a great ride by Drayden Van Dyke this day and a great trip, but these horses are, if she can get the mile and 3/8, she's supposed to win here. I believe she was sold at the auction. That's how Todd ends up training her, and Grand Motion had her when she won this race. Her last race, she was facing better horses in Tepin and Lady Laura. A good prep for this. She's going to be very tough to beat, Gabby.
I thought it was an excellent prep, and now she doesn't have to face horses like Tepin and Lady Laura. She does have to prove that she can get the distance. I think she can, because she's one that shows a little bit of versatility in the afternoon. She's shown that she can be effective closer to the lead. She can be effective taking back off the pace. So I have so much confidence in her that I did single her. But there are other horses like Christoph's mare to the inside with Julian, who you'd have to figure she's going to be very forwardly placed.
She's got to be forwardly placed. Now, she was able to steal away in a great ride by Joelle when she won back at Belmont in October, but she's run well in some other races. She had some trips in there, and she's the one I think you could have more confidence getting the distance. Distance is the great equalizer, and if Photo Call has one possible chink in her armor in this race, it's the mile and 3/8, ultimately too far, but she did only lose by a length at a mile and a half here. I'm going to back up with the 1, but Photo Call's so much worse to beat.
I thought this race was, it took on a whole new kind of dynamic in terms of the pace scenario, because obviously she will be forwardly placed. Quiet Kitten, I think, is going to go, and that might be the best thing for her. We saw Olorda last time out just suddenly show speed. She set a new course record in that race in the very one, and Quiet Kitten was left chasing in her wake. So I thought that they could get aggressive with her, and I respect her a bit on the ticket.
Quiet Kitten?
Quiet Kitten. Okay. Using her 3rd. Okay. But I'm singling. I'm singling in the Rainbow Six.
You've been in the heat for a while. I understand. Sort of, I went back to New York and I kind of chilled out for a little while. It's been a rough 4 months for you.
We'll move on to race 12, the Grade 2 Honey Fox. And this is another race where we have the likes of Sandiva, Tammy the Torpedo, Larry Lara, who you would think that in terms of the Pick 5 and Rainbow Six, a lot of people would be honing in on them, but you prefer the 2, Celestine.
Yeah, you and I have a very different opinion in this race. You don't like my top pick, Celestine. I don't like your top pick, Tammy the Torpedo. Now, I will agree, because you're going to make the argument, it's a fair one. When Tammy Torpedo beat Celestine, Tammy Torpedo ran the better race, and I have no argument with that. I didn't love Tammy Torpedo's last race. Now, maybe she's a better horse when she's coming from behind, and even though she was able to control last time, Tammy, it's not her preferred running style. But on this course, I want to have some speed, and I thought Celestine's last race was really, really strong. She was chasing a very fast pace and made that move. Faux Flyer ran like a wildebeest in there to get it done. Partisan Politics, a nice horse. I think Celestine's wiring the field for Junior Alvarado, who might have a big day, and had the pleasure of being on the airplane with me last night.
How was that?
I'm sure it was exciting for him.
I'm sure he's very scared. He probably wanted to switch
He probably
seats.
was wondering why I was crying so much during the turbulence.
You were probably sitting on the back of the plane, and he opted for the front there. But looking at Celestine, look, it was a heartbreaker for me back in the Tropical Park Oaks. I think I even singled her that day.
But Tammy Torpedo was best. She really was good.
She was best. But the thing about Tammy the Torpedo is I think with her races, and I know you don't like her last race in the Swanee River.
I don't hate it. I just don't like her in this spot.
She can continues to improve, and she's tactical. And I agree with you. She doesn't need the lead. I think she's more effective taking off the pace, but she will give Celestine a little bit of a run for her money, and she's one that gradually develops. What do you do with a horse like the 6, Lady Lara, who off the layoff had to face Tepin?
I think that she's terrific, and a mile is her right distance, and she can win, but I think she's pace compromised in here, and that's why I put her third, but I'm not going to be shocked when she runs well. We haven't even talked about Sandiva yet. My problem with Sandiva is when she won the Marshalls River, she was able to control, and I don't think she ran that well, and I just think this is a much tougher field. Though I picked her second, I absolutely am going to use her, and she can win. I think she's going to be overbet, and I'm still not convinced that she's as good as she was in the past, though she does do her best running at Gulfstream. She
does do her best running, but you look at the pace scenario here as well, and I agree with you.
Totally different dynamic.
Totally different dynamic, and we saw Lady Lara get the best of her when it wasn't that type of scenario in the past. So I prefer others in there, although I do respect her in the Rainbow 6.
This is a good race. I'm looking forward. I even think the 8 Elusive Collection's not wildly impossible.
You liked her last time.
I think she ran better than it looks last time. She didn't really ever get a clean, comfortable trip.
She didn't, and she very well could improve. It almost looked like she kind of got a little bit short in the latter half of the stretch as well.
I'd love to see Johnny be aggressive with her from the gate and get her into position behind the 2-horse Celestine.
The Grade 2 Pan American. What a race this is, too. And we'll revisit Grand Tito and Keigan's last performance and the Grade 2 McDermott. And this was a solid performance from Grand Tito.
No, Grand Tito did run well in here to get it done and was able to beat Keigan. Keigan's one of the coolest horses in racing. He always shows up. He seems like he can run from 6 furlongs to a mile and a half effectively. He's a terrific horse, but one thing he doesn't do is win. And it's been a long time since he's finished first. He
2014.
draws very well on the inside. Grand Tito is not going to be able to control. I know he wasn't the speed last time, but he was able to sit a comfortable second. And I have to think that Seeking Alpha is going to be aggressively ridden in this race. And so at the very least with Seeking Alpha, you're going to see an honest pace, and Jay Gatsby's not slow. So I think from a pace dynamic, it doesn't flow in Grand Tito's favor.
I completely agree with you, and I think the mile and a half is a great equalizer here too. He won't be able to get the same type of pace scenario that he did last time out. I think the turf is playing differently than it was on that particular day. It was very, very firm, and since then we've had some rain. And we could see a different dynamic. I like Keigan. I think, like you said, I think he's a great horse. He's been effective at 7 furlongs. He's been effective at a mile.
He's just a neat horse that just shows up all the time. He just doesn't seem to remember how to win anymore. I feel bad for him. I would like to see him win just because he kind of deserves it.
Yes, he does. Now, the horse that you and I both find very interesting is a 10, Montclair. And he is going to have to take leaps and bounds of steps forward in order to really to win this race and face other horses like Keigan. But he looks like a horse that will love the added distance. And not to mention, last time out, Andy, I was very impressed. He was reserved the entire stretch. Once he finally tipped out, the turn of foot that he showed just a few strides from the wire impressed me enough to put him on top.
He didn't look, even though it was a mile and 3/16 last time, he certainly didn't look like a horse that was going to be able to control, going to win that race going shorter. It seemed to be a prep. When he ran second at Delaware at a mile and a half, he caught a ridiculously slow pace and ran very well. You and I are on the same page in this race. It might be the only race today.
Wake Forest. What do you do with a horse like this? He clearly came to the United States in seek of a firmer course, and that's not what he got in the Arlington Million. And this is a horse who he obviously likes a firmer going, and that's exactly the conditions he's going to get today.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I actually was speaking to Chad yesterday, and we did briefly talk about this race, and he said that he thought that the firm going might really help this horse.
He's kind of a very interesting horse you have to use. Now, to the headliner, the moment that we've all been waiting for, the Grade 1 Florida Derby. We'll start it off with going back to when we last saw Mohaymen in the Grade 2 Fountain of Youth.
Mohaymen has been terrific, but it's time for Mohaymen to step forward with a Derby caliber race. And I understand that they don't want him running 108 figures and peaking too soon, and I respect that Kieran is trying the right thing with him, and he's certainly a trainer that doesn't need us to tell people how good he is. But at the end of the day, he's had softish trips, beating non-real. I mean, Zulu's okay. He's facing a serious foe in Nyquist, and in my opinion, he's starting to look like a very good horse that was precocious and has never really improved.
Have they really let him unleash, though, is my question.
I think they tried hard in that race. Do you think he could have won that race by a lot more?
Well, it looked like he was kind of geared down a couple strides from the wire.
They're 1,200-pound horses. How much could they have slowed them down?
Regardless of that, there's a whole new dynamic here. And if Mohaymen was running on the West Coast, obviously Nyquist would probably be the heavy favorite in this race. Nyquist has to ship across country. We have seen him. There were a couple of changes there in his shipment here. He was supposed to come in on Monday. He came in on Tuesday. He has been training in the morning. He has to face different weather as well. It's very hot, humid down here. We saw him train the first day. He was a little bit heated, but ever since then he has been acclimating well, in my opinion. And now you look at a horse like Mohaymen, who has two-turn races here locally. The progression has been steady. Now Nyquist has to ship across country and get the added distance.
Yeah, I don't worry about the shipping that much. Doesn't mean it couldn't come into play. I mean, we'll take a look at Nyquist's last race to San Vicente, a race where he did what Mohaymen has not shown he can do yet this year. He got a fast figure. He got 101 by. He stepped his game up. I know Exaggerator didn't run that well, but I'm not convinced that Exaggerator is not a better horse sprinting. And I still think he's a pretty good horse, Exaggerator, and arguably better than the horses that we've seen Mohaymen running against. And, you know, it's not as though Mohaymen is doing his training at Gulfstream. I know he's doing this climate, but it's not exactly chilly out in California, though they haven't had spectacular weather from what I've heard for some of the winter. And Mohaymen is training at Palm Meadows, and he's shipping down here, and he's running. So it's not like Gulfstream is his home track. It's not like a horse that's training at Aqueduct that's coming over, and he's sort of got that. It's not. He's got the race over the track. Listen, I think they're going. I'm very interested how they're going to bet this race. How heavy a favorite's Mohaymen going to be?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're supposed to be even money in 6 to 5. In which case, I mean, like you, I'm using both of them, and I just want to enjoy this race. This is going to be a really exciting matchup. I'm a degenerate horse player, but there are things about the game that I love, and one of them is
you have a heart, right?
Watching this race and rooting for these two horses. My problem with Mohaymen is more based on the fact that he's 7-2 favorite now for the Derby, and I think he's closer to about 8 or 10% to win the race. So he's a big underlay. So I just feel like people have overrated him. I still think he's a very good horse.
Now, I've been asked this question several times too. How do you round out the Tribe? Fellowship? How do you bet this race? Even?
Well, it's very hard to go against Fellowship and take it to the edge as the other two horses. What gives Fellowship the edge is he's going to be sucking up and picking up pieces, whereas Take It to the Edge is probably going to be involved in what could be a pretty contentious pace.
And that might be his Achilles heels in here. And we actually saw him paddock school yesterday. He's a very big, good-looking horse too. But the pace scenario, just I have my reservations about that. Whereas Fellowship, I think he's going to be sitting a good trip and perhaps rounding out the Tribe. But obviously, this is a showdown between the two top Derby contenders.
It's going to be very hard to beat both of these horses, and it's just exciting to have the two current favorites. And it's not to say there aren't a lot of horses nipping at their heels, but this is a real test, and today is the day. And Mohaymen can lose this race, but he's got to lose it in a very fast performance behind Nyquist. Anything other than that, and I'm going to be firm that he plateaued off his 2-year-old form.
A big, big day here in South Florida, and really, really looking forward to today's finale, our featured race, the Grade 1 Florida Derby. That's enough for us here today on Gulfstream Today. Larry Colmus will be up next with Scratches and Changes, and we'll be back here all afternoon. Thanks for joining us.